Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning, I'm going to give the last lecture on the Fukanzazengi. I don't always have the count right, but I think this is number 11. Anyway, it's the last one. So here's what we're going to talk about. Fukanzazengi says, Dogen says, please, honored followers of Zen. Maybe I should back up. If there's anyone here who doesn't know what the Fukanzazengi is, it's a text written by Dogen Zenji, the 13th century founder of Soto Zen, about how to sit Zazen, how we meditate. So all of these are on YouTube, if you care to refresh yourselves. So anyway, this is the last paragraph. Please, honored followers of Zen, long accustomed to groping for the elephant, do not be suspicious of the true dragon. Devote your energies to a way that directly indicates the absolute. Revere the person of complete attainment who is beyond human agency. Gain accord with the enlightenment of the Buddhas. Succeed to the legitimate lineage of the ancestor Samadhi. Constantly perform in such a manner, and you are assured of being a person such as they. Your treasure store will open of itself, and you will use it at will. So let's look at the first line here, which is, the first part is, please, honored followers of Zen. So you are honored followers of Zen. If you weren't honored followers of Zen, you probably wouldn't be here listening to this talk. So you are, based on our teachings, also already endowed as Buddhas. We all have Buddha nature. We all are Buddha nature. So we have the mind of a Buddha, we have the body of Buddha. And those of you who've chose to take up this teaching and become, dare I say, something like card-carrying members of Soto Zen, then you are in the lineage of the Buddha's ancestors. So the next part of this line is, long accustomed to groping for the elephant. So this is a reference to a story. And in Asia, the elephant is a symbol for wisdom, self-esteem, patience, power, strength, and compassion. Sounds pretty good, huh? Wouldn't mind having all of those qualities. So all of these things are qualities that we want to cultivate in our practice. So what does it mean to grope for the elephant? So this is based on an early Buddhist story, and it's called The Blind Men and the Elephant. It comes from the Pali Canon. And here's how the story goes. So there were a bunch of blind men that were called together by the king. And the king, he said, "Oh, blind men, this is an elephant. This is its head. This is its ear. This is its tusk. This is its trunk. This is its body. This is its leg. This is its back. This is its tail. This is the end of its tail." And then he says, have you seen an elephant? And they all say, "We have, sire." So the king says, "Well, what is an elephant like?" And the one who touched the head said, "An elephant is like a pot." And the one who touched the ear said, "An elephant is like a winnowing basket." And the one who touched the tusk said, "An elephant is like a plow pole." And then it went on like this. He talked in the story, I'm going to shorten it, but he talks to every one of the guys, and they all say what a tail is like, you know, what, etc. The legs are like tree trunks, etc. So everybody has a different description about from their particular point of view, or I would say even their particular point of feel on the elephant as to what it was. And then they all started to fight about it, because they were also attached to their view that each one of them was like, no, an elephant is this, an elephant is that. And they got so agitated about this with fighting each other that they ended up physically fighting each other about, who was right. So then, having told this story, the Buddha sums this up and he says, some monks and priests are attached to their views, and having seized hold of them, they wrangle those who see only one side of a thing. So some monks and priests are attached to their views, and having seized hold of them, they wrangle like those who see only one side of a thing. I know this has never happened to you. It's certainly never happened to me, that I had a one-pointed fixed view and perhaps had not seen the whole of the elephant in the course of my inquiry. So, it's not an accident that first Buddha picked this as a simile or an analogy, and it's not surprising that Dogen picked up on this, because we're all working to find our way in our practice. And unfortunately, we all come up with ideas about what we think that practice is that may not necessarily actually hold a view that is really the view of the whole elephant. So we do this because we want to improve ourselves, right? So we say, well, I'm doing this so I can acquire wisdom, or I'm doing this so I can have more equanimity, or I'm doing this because I want to experience Satori, or whatever the story is that we have about why we're doing this. And in particular, we're talking about Zazen, right? So one of the pitfalls of Zazen is having an idea about actually what we're doing, even though it's human nature to want to have an idea about what it is that we're doing. So he says we become like blind men groping for the elephant. If we sit Zazen with this goal of achieving something in particular, then we're going to be quarreling with ourselves about what this is, right? So who hasn't had the experience of sitting Zazen and saying to myself or to yourself something like, oh, I just fell asleep. That's terrible. I'm a horrible person. I should wake up now, or I just had this thought and I shouldn't think. And therefore, I have to get rid of all my thoughts, or whatever it is, something like that. So our actual instructions for how to sit Zazen are really simple. It's just come back to the present moment. Dogen doesn't say, stop your thinking. Dogen doesn't say, beat yourself up while you're sitting. That's not one of the instructions. Dogen doesn't say things like that. He just says, come back to the present moment. Think non-thinking, which is disengaging the gears of our mind and just being present for what's happening. That's all we have to do. There's no goal in this. You're not saying I'm doing this because I'm going to get wisdom, or I'm doing this because I'm going to experience Satori, or I'm doing this because I want to be a better person, or something like that. You're just doing this because from the Soto Zen point of view, we do this because this is the dignified activity of a Buddha, to sit Zazen. That's it. So we don't have to add all this extra stuff, groping for the elephant. So all we need to do is just settle into our life on the cushion, settle into our life off the cushion. Very simple. Aha. Very simple. So that's our basic instruction. And actually, that's the instruction of how do we deal with interactions that we're in. Come back to the present moment. Try to let go of your preconceived ideas about what's going on. Try not to force an agenda, but just really presence yourself for the conversation as it's happening and see what's coming up out of that, Come back to the present moment. So letting go of these ideas, wearing out our desire to achieve some kind of preconceived goal, just as we say, let Zazen do Zazen. Let your life do your life. I think it's Ujjayi Moroshi who said, let your life force bloom. That was one of Blanche Hartman's favorite things. So the next part of this is, Dogen says, do not be suspicious of the true dragon. So what's that about? That's another story that he's pointing to. So this is a Chinese story about a guy named Wei Kongshi. And Wei Kongshi was fascinated by dragons. His house was covered with pictures of dragons. He had really expensive statues of dragons. He read stories about dragons. He dreamt about dragons. It was just like his whole thing was dragons. So one day, a real dragon heard about this guy, and he said, I think I'll go visit him and really, make his day. A real dragon is going to come visit him. So he comes to visit him, lands on the windowsill of his house, and the guy freaks, right? He completely runs away. He's totally freaked out about the fact that a real dragon has suddenly appeared on his windowsill. So he ran away. So Dogen says, do not be suspicious of the true dragon. So this is this way in which, this Kongzhi, he had all sorts of ideas about what a dragon was, right? Though none of them were actually moving, none of them were breathing fire, none of them were landing on his windowsill, but he had all these ideas about what the true dragon was. So that's how we are about practice. We have all these ideas about what our practice is. Dogen says in one of his fascicles, he says, be careful about, what you think you're going to get out of this, because inevitably, whatever it is that you do get out of this is not going to be whatever it is you think you're going to get out of this. People like to quote Suzuki Roshi. Basically, Suzuki Roshi is quoting Dogen when he said, something like, be careful what you wish for. And my guess is that Dogen was quoting someone else who was quoting somebody else because, hey, this is such an obvious thing in our school, is to just let go of these ideas. So when the real thing happens, you're not going to get all freaked out about it, whatever that real thing is. I'm not sure what Dogen's pointing towards here, because I don't think he's pointing towards some kind of non-dual Satori experience. I think he's just pointing towards really presence yourself. That if the thing that you are being instructed to do, when you're actually doing it, it is important not to get attached to the doing of it. Just let it be what it is and acknowledge that, and then keep going however it is that you're going, right? Don't hold on to anything. So we just settle into this life of Zazen, and we also settle into our life of Zazen, this Zazen mind, outside of the formal practice of Zazen. Let go of all the ideas we have about that, and just really try to be present in this way with what's actually coming out. Then Dogen said, devote your energies to a way that directly indicates the absolute. Devote your energies to a way that directly indicates the absolute. So what is this absolute that that directly indicates? The absolute is just the combination of the particularity of the self, particularity of others, particularity of dharmas, and at the same time, the complete codependent, interpenetration, mutual identity of everything functioning together. So it's the totality dependent upon the totality for its total functioning. At the same time, that totality functions within the context of the particularity of all the things that we relate to, the water in the cup and yourself and other people and all the things that we relate to. So if we devote our energies to a way that directly indicates the absolute, we're devoting our energies to a way in which we absolutely manifest this acknowledgement of both self and other as a codependent, interbeing relationship that will result in the bodhisattva path, or the bodhisattva way of being skillful in these interrelationships. So that is where we should be putting our energy. Don't get caught on thinking about the word absolute, because when we think about the word absolute, we think about some kind of woo-woo thing. So in the Heart Sutra, it says, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is form. Okay, we're all pretty familiar with that. But Dogen adds in his commentary to the Heart Sutra in the Shobogenzo, which is called Makahanya Haramitsu, he says form is form, emptiness is emptiness. So your life is form emptiness. Emptiness, it's like one thing. So when Dogen says, your life is just emptiness is emptiness, your life is just form is form. He's saying, as soon as you say form, emptiness is already there. You don't even have to say it. As soon as you say emptiness, form is already there. You don't even have to say it. So it's like he's just saying, okay, just this one thing also is that one thing. They're all one thing. So, for example, it would be like all of these things functioning together. That is what the absolute is. So it's like a coin. We have a coin, right? One side of the coin is emptiness. The other side of the coin is called form. But we're not, but we have to have both functioning together to make this thing we call a coin. So when we have a coin, we call it a coin. And what is that coin? I would say that coin is just form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is form, emptiness is emptiness. As my category Roshi would say, super fast. You go super fast. And if you take something and you oscillate it super fast, and one side is black and one side is white, what do you come up with? You don't have black and white anymore. You have some gray when things oscillate really fast together, going together. I would say this is going beyond form and emptiness. This is, how are you going to spend that coin? This is the Bodhisattva path. The Bodhisattva path is, how do you use that coin? Who gives a flying about form and emptiness? What you need to worry about is, how are you going to spend the coin? How are you going to relate to other people? How are you going to relate to yourself? How are you going to relate to all the things in the universe? How are we going to do things that are efficacious as opposed to harmful? That's how we spend that coin. That's the Bodhisattva path. So he says, do not be suspicious of the true dragon. Devote your energies to a way that directly indicates the absolute. And I would say directly indicating the absolute is the Bodhisattva path. We don't have to worry about the absolute because we have so many ideas about that. Just let go of all the ideas and definitions and just live your life. Just do your best to find that interbeing, find that coin, flip that coin around until there is no self, no other. There is just this moment of response. And then Dogen says, revere the person of complete attainment who is beyond all human agency. Revere the person of complete attainment who is beyond all human agency. So, beyond all human agency also translates as a person who has reached the ultimate point, reached the goal of goallessness, finished what is to be done, who has achieved full knowledge and who has achieved nothing more to do. Okay, that's the description of the Japanese word, which is Zetsu Gaku Mui no Hito. Excuse my accent. We got this phone call the other day, a reminder of an appointment for the doctor, and the recorded voice was doing its best to do Spanish, and the accent was pretty gringo. So my accent is pretty gringo here. Anyway, okay, so who is this person of a complete attainment who is beyond all human agency? And Dogen's saying, okay, you want to revere that person. I would say that, just honestly, it's unlikely that any of us are going to reach the state in which there is no more practice, in which we do not practice anymore, or we do not have to put any effort into cultivating skillful means, compassion, and wisdom, which technically would be this interbeing non-duality relationship. I think all of us have to keep working at this in each moment after moment after moment. So in some moments, absolutely, we don't have to think about it. In some moments, we've got it down. In other moments, we totally mess it up, right? And then there are other moments where we have to think about it and we see our own delusion, and then we incorporate that, and then we respond skillfully. And all the gray areas in between all of that. And then on top of that, sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't do it, sometimes we do, we don't, etc. And all the little moments in between. So I think when I read this, revere the person of a complete attainment who is beyond all human agency, what I'm hearing is revere the Buddhas and ancestors, revere our lineage, who, by the way, were also folks who were probably making mistakes, getting it right, etc. They're human beings. And as we know, when we get these stories, it's kind of like when somebody dies and you go to the funeral, you tell good stories about people, right? You never say, that guy was a real whatever. He was a real so-and-so. I really didn't like him. Let me tell you about the day that guy did this, 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 and this. It was really unskillful. We don't do that. We usually come and say, oh, he was so funny. Let me tell you a joke that he liked, etc. So in some ways, the Buddhas and ancestors are like that. We're getting the best of what they had to offer. So let's revere that. We're getting the best of what these people had to offer. So let's look at that and revere that. And I think also it's good to acknowledge that they were human beings, so that we know that they were not so exalted that we cannot follow the path that they followed, so that we follow in the footsteps and honor and take heed of the teachings of those who came before us. And then the next line is, we gain accord with the enlightenment of the Buddhas, succeed to the legitimate lineage of the ancestors' samadhi. Gain accord with the enlightenment of the Buddhas, succeed in the legitimate lineage of the ancestors' samadhi. So to gain accord means that we align ourselves with, right? We figure out, okay, what is this path? What is it that the Buddhas and ancestors did? And in this particular case, talking about Fukanzazengi, which is about sitting zazen, one of the dignified behaviors of a Buddha is to sit zazen. So the dignified behavior of a Buddha actually is a fascicle that Dogen, a whole fascicle Dogen wrote about what is a dignified behavior of a Buddha. So one of these things is this sitting zazen, and to accord oneself, with enlightenment of the Buddhas. So what is the enlightenment of the Buddhas? I would suggest the enlightenment of the Buddhas is in the Buddha's mind. Like when we talk about precepts, we say in the mind of the Buddha, there is no killing. In the mind of the Buddha, there is no stealing. In the mind of the Buddha, there is no intoxicating self or other. In the mind of the Bodhisattva, usually is how this goes. And so if we think about that, it means that so for example, stealing, in a fully engaged, fully interbeing relationship, that in our mind, we would not think of doing it in the first place. So maybe a better example would be, sometimes we make jokes at other people's expense, and then somebody makes a joke at your expense. And then you think to yourself, do they really think that? Well, there's a way in which actually they do, because if they did not think that, they could not have the thought of making the joke at your expense in the first place. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So in the mind of the Bodhisattva, there is no joke at your expense. So this is this mind that we're trying to cultivate. If we are with somebody, David Brooks just wrote this book, and I can't remember the name of it. And in the book, David Brooks tells you like his 5 things or something that you should do in order to cultivate better relationships. And they're very, they're right down the line of just generally how to be, skillful. And one of the things he says is, when you see somebody, when you talk to somebody, be genuinely interested in that person. Like really go to that person and try to mirror back to them a very positive response to that person. So I think about somebody like the Dalai Lama, right? We see pictures of the Dalai Lama. He rushes up, he's smiling, he grabs you by both of his hands, and he's like, oh, he doesn't even know you, right? He's like, oh, I'm so happy to meet you, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, in the mind of the Bodhisattva, there is no person who is not worth greeting that way. In the mind of the Bodhisattva, that is the way that a Bodhisattva greets someone else, because he sees that they are Buddha. So gain accord with the enlightenment of the Buddhas. Gain accord with our deepest, inmost request, as Suzuki Roshi would say. What is our inmost request? Isn't for most of us, if we're going to talk about this in an abstract way, isn't for most of us that we really want to be in accord with the Buddhas? We really want to let forth our Buddha mind, that we really want to be skillful, we want to be compassionate, we want to be wise, we want to have equanimity. Isn't that what most of us in our inmost request really want to do? And, there's a Japanese expression, falls down 7 times, gets up 8. It's like, or do you remember those little bozo dolls? You punch them and they come back up, it's like, I think I had one of those as a kid, like punch it, comes back up. That's our human spirit, right? That's what we want to do to gain accord. It's like, yeah, we're going to make mistakes. Yeah, we're going to do something that's stupid and unskillful. Fall down 7 times, gets up that last time, that we keep trying to get up. People say horrible things happen. They say, we are resilient. We are this, we get Boston strong or whatever it is. And I think, yeah, that's what human beings do. That's what living beings do. Living beings are in general resilient. Living beings are like that spirit, that spirit. So our Bodhisattva practice is to take that spirit and to gain accord with the enlightenment of the Buddhas. And at the same time, we have to let go of our idea of what it means to say the enlightenment of the Buddhas, because inevitably, if we say that, it becomes something that is totally unachievable. So really, this is about how do we, in every interaction in our life, or as much as we can, because we get fatigued, sometimes it's like, I was reading in this text that I'm commenting on, that's called the Go Show, which was written by 2 of Dogen's disciples. It's commentary on the Genjo Koan. And at one point they say something about, you just keep trudging up the mountain. You just keep going up the mountain and going up the mountain and going up the mountain. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, that just sounds so tiring. Don't we get a tea break? So it's like, we all need to take tea breaks. We need to stop on the side of the mountain and get out our, cookies and tea or whatever it is, and, take a break. We all need to go outside and look at the ocean, or go see a movie, or read a murder mystery, or whatever it is, or just hang out and laugh a lot. So this doesn't need to be some kind of serious, nose to the grindstone practice. Because if it is, the chances are good that you're not going to want to do it. And like, why not? Why would you want to do it? So, girls just want to have fun, and so do boys. So, don't forget to stop for a tea break. And then he says, you will succeed to the legitimate lineage of the ancestor samadhi. So I think if we just make this effort, we don't need to worry about words like samadhi. We don't need to worry about enlightenment. We don't need to worry about Buddhas. We don't need to worry about succeeding to the lineage. We just need to worry about doing our practice as it arises right in this moment. And that's Zazen. And then he said, constantly perform in such a manner, and you are assured of being a person such as they, which is true. If we make this effort, to actually walk the practice, not just listen to the admonitions of our school, not just listen and read about this in some kind of abstract way. We actually do the practice. Why don't we do the practice? Why don't we do it? Because it's hard. Why don't we do it? Because sometimes being nice is exactly the thing that you do not want to do. Sometimes being nice is when you really want to punch that person in the face. And when you feel that way, doing the practice is really, really hard. It's like there's this little guy, you remember the thing, and I think it's in Pinocchio, it's like the devil and the angel on their shoulder, you know, and the angel's going, oh, do the Bodhisattva practice, do the Bodhisattva practice. The devil's going, I don't want to do the Bodhisattva practice. I can't stand this person. I just want to punch them in the face. No, you have to do it. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Back and forth like that. But the thing about it is that we have to come to some place where, yes, I do. We have to remember, that's why vows are important, to remember our vow. And we might not get it right the first time, and we might have to sit down and say to ourselves back and forth, you know, do, don't, do, don't, do, don't, and remind ourselves of why we're doing the practice. And then try again, and try again, and try again. Falls down, gets up, falls down, gets up. So constantly perform as best you can, with the caveat of having tea, constantly perform in such a manner, and you are assured of being a person such as they, which is true. You know, the interesting thing about Zazen in particular is if you just come and do Zazen, or do Zazen at home, or wherever you're going to do Zazen, something transformative happens while you're looking the other way. It's like if you go and sit down and you do your best to stay awake, and even when you can't stay awake, there's something in the activity of just sitting down that is transformative over time. Something like magic is happening underneath the surface. So if we just keep making this effort, it will bear fruit, if you will, but let go. Don't let go of the effort of doing the practice. Let go of the effort of making the idea about the practice. Does that make sense? And just be present for the practice. And then he says, your treasure store will open of itself and you will use it at will. Okay, so what's a treasure store here? The treasure store is, let me see, I'm kind of just one off my notes here. So the treasure store is hozo in Japanese, hozo. And it usually means scriptures, right? It usually means a treasury store of Buddhist scriptures. But you know, Dogen says he understands scriptures to be reality itself. He said in Bukkyo, which means Buddha Sutras, he said, the sutras are the entire world in the 10 directions. There is no moment or place that is not sutras. Regard them as the instruments of the great way and the sutras of the Buddha's house. So he says, you know, the sutras are the entire world in the 10 directions. So for me, I look at birds flying, for example, like I was looking at television the other day and they showed some birds flying. And, you know, we see birds flying and we think, oh, birds are so free, you know, birds are flying in the air and they're beautiful to look at and all that stuff. And then I think about birds and I think, well, how do birds feel about being a bird? And how do birds feel about when they're hurt? Like, what is it like to be, you know, you go down and you see the seagulls on the wall out there by the esplanade and they're missing a foot, you know, and I think, what's it like to be a bird missing a foot? Like, what does a bird think about missing its foot? And I imagine that the bird has pain when the foot gets cut off. But at a certain point, the bird incorporates the missing foot into just being with nothing else involved in it. And what I'm getting at is, I think if one could just come back to this place of each moment unfolding as each moment and letting go of the before and after of that moment, then that moment just becomes that moment. It doesn't have baggage with it. It can just become that moment. As human beings, we have baggage that we bring to things because of the way our minds work. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's actually, in many cases, a good thing. And we also can't, I want to be really careful about this, because we also can't jettison that baggage, right? In the sense that if we've been traumatized or whatever, it's like we don't just cut that off and say, I'm not gonna have that experience. But for me, it's like, also take all of that in, because it's complicated. It's not easy, and so I want to acknowledge all of that complication in there. Is that I think, what would it be like if I could just be present for my life it is right now and incorporate that? It doesn't mean you don't do something, but it just is an interesting thing to think about. But you have to be careful about it, because this is not about cutting things off. That's the really important part here, is that I'm not suggesting that we cut off our pain. I'm not suggesting that we cut off the trauma in our lives. But I am just playing with this idea, and I'm sharing that idea with you, just playing with it lightly, carrying it lightly, not, do you know what I'm saying? Not making this some kind of like, it should be like this. But I think, so when I said this in relationship to this thing about the birds, and what I'm talking about is a sutra, a teaching, right? Everything that we encounter, everything that we see is potentially something that we can understand as a teaching. So, and also we have to be careful about how we interpret that understanding as a teaching, so that we don't turn it into something that's unwholesome. Because what I just said could become a very unwholesome teaching, because it could be a teaching about cutting things off, and that's not what I'm talking about. So we have to be careful about this. And I think in general, we have to be careful in our practice about how we interpret and understand things. And if they seem like something that is detrimental, it seems like something that your heart says to you, I don't know, I don't think that sounds like a very good idea, then go back to the teachings, go back to your teacher and say, Shinshu said this thing, and I'm not so sure that I think that sounds like a very good idea. What do you think, Jaku? And who knows what you'll say.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. So anyway, I'll just add that in there. So this treasure store, which Dogen says is everything, is a treasure store. Everything is the treasure store of the Buddhist teaching. And he said, you will use it at will. So you will be able to take this teaching, apply it to your life, and use the Buddha Dharma as you will in your life within the context of each moment that you meet. Thank you very much.